Ex Nihilo. Talking to Dear Rebecca Winthrop, thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to discussing with you how our digital age is impacting the younger generation, and this question has occupied you throughout your career. You spent many years working in global education, partnering with UN organizations, national organizations, and civil society actors to research factors influencing children's education. Currently at the Brookings Institute, where you're leading the Global Task Force on AI in Education, you served as the technical advisor of the UN Secretary General's Global Education First initiative, and then as an advisor to President Obama's Commission on Women and Girls. In short, you've been working in the eye of the hurricane, or more specifically, at the core of your latest book, which is titled The Disengaged Teen. Why is it that children, despite the natural curiosity, are disconnecting from the world?
Lovely, lovely to be here. Thank you for
it's a
having
pleasure.
me.
Yeah.
Is this a question you would like me to answer?
Yeah, that's it. Why is it
Tell us about
that children disengage from the world?
Yes, yes. There are so many answers to this. And one of the things we found, the book, we did 3 years of research with my co-author, Jenny Anderson, and I, and it's largely in the United States, some in Europe, a little bit in the UK. And we found that there is a mix of what's happening. Some of it is very much in the school, and a huge, basically universal issue that drives kids, at least Gen Z kids that we talk to disconnect, is a question that they don't use the word, but we use the word relevance. They do not see the point of what they're doing and the link between what they're learning, the tasks they're asked to do, and very importantly, how they're asked to do the tasks, with preparing them for an outside world, helping them connect with others, helping them solve problems. We have a great opening line or story. It's not opening, but somewhere at the beginning of the book, where we say, imagine you are going to work in an office, and you work in an office, and you show up in your office, and you open your binder, and you're working on your very important project, and 45 minutes later a big noise happens, and you close your binder, and you move to the next office right next door, and you open a new binder working on another very important project, and you do that for 8 hours, and then you leave. And that is what kids talk to us about. So relevance is a big one. And another piece that ended up being quite large, not for every kid, but for a number of kids, was the sense that they don't belong. And it is very acute with different groups of kids, whether they have learning differences, whether they're an ethnic minority in a mature, a school, whether they're first generation. We had, kids talk about being, we have one character in the book we followed 100 kids, many of them over 3 years, and picked several of them to tell the story of their research that we found. And one character talks about being, a handful of Latina students and Latino students in her school, and then loving the Latino culture but being very embarrassed, and as they would drive up for her mom would drop her off at school, she would make her mom turn off her music about 2 blocks away, so no one would know that they were listening to salsa, because nobody else listened to salsa. So belonging was important, because if kids feel like they don't belong, it's a lot of cognitive load. They're scanning the horizon in a classroom, where they sit at lunch, looks that people give them, and thinking, ooh, are they going to be friends with me? Are they going to be mean? Can I fit in here? Rather than, ooh, the Pythagorean theorem, how interesting. How could that possibly be used? And, etc. So those are 2 big ones in school-based environments. And then a third one is outside of school. So many shocks from post-COVID, COVID is not the number one reason kids disengage, but it is a long tail for children.
Sure.
Desocialization and technology filled that void. You know, we talked to many kids who had things that they benefited from being online, finding other artists who shared their same love of a particular, illustrator and had found a community. But so many kids struggled with, doom scrolling, feeling bad about themselves, not getting out in the world. And so it's this mix of things that kind of eats away at kids' interest, attention, and engagement.
Well, I think even more than that in this day and age. I mean, just thinking back, because we're baby boomers right now. I think they're a little bit behind us.
I am a little bit. My parents were baby boomers.
Well, yeah.
I'm not that far behind. I'm not that far behind.
But yeah, I mean, the point is, just being an adolescent, you have all of these identification issues of trying to figure out who you are, what's going on.
Exactly.
And for us as baby boomers, it had books that you read and you had communities. But now, in Burkhardian terms, X equals X to the N, we have this scaling up and this amplification of artificial intelligence and the net. And you're just overwhelmed and you can connect. And I mean, I get the whole thing now that you're talking about. It's incredible. So you've identified a basic phenomenology of different educational types. There's the resistor who avoids or disrupts. Then there's the passenger who displays a minimax logic of doing minimal effort for maximal gains. And then there's the achiever who's interested in just getting good grades. And lastly, there's this explorer who follows their own curiosity. When you look at this topology, couldn't it be that only the explorer, if fortunate, emerges from the educational system unscathed, while all the others incur battle scars, of which the deepest is not being seen at all? Considering that the disengaged teen is a relatively new phenomenon, doesn't this bring the question to relief, where does this neglect of children's needs originate?
Well, I love how you hit on something that we talk about in the book and call the battle scars that aren't necessarily seen. Because one of the first big aha moments, but I will get to your question in a second, but one of the first big aha moments for us was the language around how motivated and engaged young people are around learning has been pretty binary. Either engaged, they're disengaged. And the truth is, it's a continuum. And there's these engagement profiles. And we created these because we found this was what was happening in our research. And we also found that most people, and I say most people as in educators, school leaders, parents, caregivers, families, think that what you want is achiever mode. This is the one we are striving for. And in many ways, our school system has been in an age of achievement. We can come back to that for quite some time. And we found that actually the kids who are stuck too long in achiever mode do have their own battle scars. So I totally agree that, the kids in passenger mode have their battle scars are that they might like school, they might be getting good grades even, but they find it all kind of silly and worthless, and they're physically in present and maybe doing their homework really fast or, whizzing through tests, but not really connecting what they're learning, not caring what they're learning. And they're coasting, what we would call coasting, I like the mini-max, doing the bare minimum to get by. Sometimes kids in this passenger mode are really struggling. And we found a lot of kids who are neurodiverse and really struggling. And it feels better not to try. When you struggle and struggle and struggle and don't get the help you need. So there's that. And those kids, I think, are missing out. The battle scars they have are missing out on the really important, resilient learning skills they're going to need to, navigate this new future world with AI and everything. The kids in resistor mode are the classic quote unquote problem children. They're the ones we would have thought, they're disengaged. They are not doing their homework. They're maybe being disruptive in class. They're skipping school. They are influencing the flow of instruction, just not constructively. But we did find that they have some agency. They are actually have some gumption.
Yeah.
They have some chutzpah. They
Resistance
are,
is a power.
yeah, they are using their voice and their behavior often very inappropriately, we admit, but to basically signal, oh, this isn't working for me. One of the young people we interviewed who was full-fledged resistor mode for many years, and then we can talk about this later, but went to a different learning environment that really gave him a lot more agency, and he went straight to Explorer mode. He said, I didn't have the words to say, this school thing, how it's being done, just isn't, I can't get in the groove. I can't figure it out. It doesn't fit to me. So it came out in anger. And so, that is the sort of conundrum and battle scars from resistor mode. And if kids get stuck there, they do miss out on their education. So that's a problem. The kids in achiever mode, I think, are the ones that you reference potentially as having battle scars that we can't really see. So the kids in achiever mode, many of them are in happy achiever mode. They are busy trying to get a gold star and everything put in front of them. And they're organized, and there's positives. They're goal-oriented, try really hard. They often feel very good because they're doing well and getting lots of positive feedback. However, we found this really dark underbelly to achiever mode where you might have battle scars that come out later. Like when you may have experienced this, both of you, when they get to higher education and university. And the dark underbelly is sometimes they get stuck in achiever mode and think of themselves as achievers and not anything else. And it becomes an identity. And so if they get a slightly bad grade, a B minus, then the world is over. And, we had one kid tell us, he took in the US, there's these tests to go to college, SAT, ACT, and you can take them multiple times. He was a full-on stuck in achiever mode. And he took the ACT, he got a bad score, and he said, well, I guess I'm just not going to college then. That's it. It's over. And when really, no, you can study for it. You'll be okay. So when we actually found these kids, two things, they don't take many risks. They don't take many risks in their learning. So they're reducing their creativity. They're becoming great followers, which is good in some ways, but not great when you have AI. Where you need to sort of lead and use a tool. And so I agree with your thesis that explorer mode kids are the ones that are going to be best served, that where the education system and opportunities are serving them best, and they will be the ones best able to have a successful career and higher education prospects because of it. Because these are the kids who, it's not that they are off on their own tangent, not going with the plot. We define explorer mode as something called agentic engagement, where you get an opportunity to follow your curiosity. And when kids are curious, they are way more motivated, have much more attention. They're persistent. It's also that they're driven by wanting to learn something. And then if you get
inner drive instead of
if you fail, it's okay. You'll try again because you really want to learn it. And building those explore muscles can be built anywhere. Doesn't have to be in school, but we found that less than 4% of middle school and high school students, so this would be junior secondary, senior secondary, in the US had the opportunity to regularly be in explore mode in school. So
you gave this example.
This is a problem.
I heard because I was listening to an interview this morning of this girl who was not engaged, and then she got into building a safe room for Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
And it just excelled from there. And it gave her, because you need this confidence and study skills, but this confidence to explore it. So, that's what you're hitting.
This was a great example of schools giving young people an opportunity to get into explore mode. And we're not saying they need to be in explore mode 100% of the time, but we did find that when they had opportunities to be in explore mode, they got better grades, better mental health, learned more achievement, more pro-social behavior, all good things. And the example you gave was from a character named Kia, who is this incredible young woman who lived in North Dakota and went to the school in a very rural small town, and she was really great at elementary school, and then just got bored. When she hit middle school, she got really bored. It's sort of the relevance problem, and then she stopped doing her work and got really behind. Then COVID hit, and then she got sort of sucked into social media. So when kids disengage, there's a lot of disengagement amplifiers out there to take them away. It's not necessarily the source. Social media isn't necessarily the source of disengagement, but it certainly exacerbates it. And then she thought, oh, well, she sort of went down a bad rabbit hole and was really behind and was failing, actually. And then the school, she wasn't the only one, and they got really creative, and they partnered with some really interesting organizations and the local university to come up with something to engage kids. They felt they were losing kids, a large number. And so one of the things they did, and she did this for 2 years, I believe, is you had the option, take your normal classes, math class, science class, history class, or you could try studios,
get in a project,
which were an option, which was here's the standards, what you need to meet at the end of 10th grade, let's say, come up with an initiative or project that will demonstrate you have met those standards. And one of the things she did, she did a podcast for one of the things she did, she got super fascinated by presidential assassinations. Who wouldn't be fascinated by presidential assassinations? So history, she brought in history. And then she was very interested in like CSI and science and forensic science. So that was in biology and all these other, and she combined a couple of classes, and she designed an escape room. You guys know what an escape room is, right? This game where you go in, you have to figure out the puzzle to get out before you're, whatever. And it was all her teachers had to go through it. And it was basically an escape room around the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln, and had all the science behind it and the clues. And after that, she just took off. She ended up going back to her normal class load. And she said, I've learned now to figure out how to bend the class to my interests. Wonderful. I might not love all of it, but I really love this, and I'm going to lean in. And you can be an explorer. The explore mode is really built on the work of, heavily draws from the work of John Marshall Reeve and many of his colleagues across 18 countries, US to South Korea to everywhere in between. Teachers, no matter what your curriculum, what your disciplinary policy in a school, can give kids these opportunities to be in explore mode. It includes suggesting what topic they might want to write on, suggesting how do they want to study with a friend, suggesting, allowing them, suggesting a question around a topic that they might want to start the lecture with because they're curious. These are small tweaks. You don't have to go full-scale school redesign like Kia's school in Northern Cass, but it can be done anywhere.
Could it be that the dilemma of many of these kids is that, for example, achieving something that even the educators don't believe in anymore is a real problem? Because what happened in Europe, for example, in 2001, etc., the universities was commodification and canonization of higher education, etc. Meaning all these professors would complain about the shitty modules they had to teach in a way. So these people didn't believe in the stuff they were teaching anyhow. And I would say the differentiation you make between the achieve and the explorer is the inner and outer motivation. The inner motivation would be really looking for something. The outer motivation would be, I'm just try to conform with the grades. I kind of conform with the expectations, everybody. But if nobody believes in that shit anymore, so I have a real problem. These kids sense it anyhow. I recall my son looking in the school. He saw a lot of digital illiterates, and they say, kind of weird here.
I think you hit on something that's very important, which is one of the things we learned, but it's backed up in the literature for decades on education, is teachers matter.
Sure, absolutely.
And we found that kids go through these 4 modes of engagement, sometimes on a daily basis. We have one character named Stella who's in every chapter because she really went through the 4 modes each day, depending on her teacher. So when you have a really inspiring teacher who does give a bit of autonomy, a little bit of agency, and is passionate about what they're doing, it does make a huge difference if teachers believe in what they're teaching and are passionate. We all can. That's just also common sense and common experience. She was very excited to love this class. It was a French class, and she's not that she loved French or anything, and she just took it because she had to take a foreign language. Became her favorite class because she loved the teacher. She didn't want to disappoint her, and she wanted to do well. She was really achiever mode, and then had a chemistry teacher who had been teaching for 30 years. And I think, to your point, Martin, had basically done the same thing for the last 30 years. Was basically burned out. There was a story where they didn't even get to do labs in chemistry because the school schedule was weird, and he found it just too difficult to try to fit in the labs. And I'm just going to lecture. And she was like, "What is chemistry without labs?" So she was in resistor mode. She just would shut down, would online shop. She found it very difficult. So I think the teacher makes a big difference. And again, what was interesting is that French teacher was brand new. And I don't think we want to extrapolate this, because the chemistry teacher was really at the end of his career. He was fired the next year, I think. I think the no labs thing put him over the edge, but he'd been there for 30 years and hadn't changed anything. And kids sense that. That's not to say you can't have some teachers been teaching for a long time who are incredible. I've certainly had those myself. But there's something about connecting with your students and making what you're doing relevant.
Absolutely,
like it's not a fossil in time. Like there is a reason you need to know chemistry. And in fact, a lot of this stuff is important for kids to learn. It's not that it isn't. Some stuff maybe we can do without, but it isn't that it's not important. It's almost how it's taught makes it seem irrelevant.
We spoke with the German child psychiatrist Michael Schulte-Markwort, who reached similar conclusions as yours. However, he identified a gender-specific trait that young girls are especially affected, that they see no role models, no hope, no way forward in their lives. Paradoxically, this group also includes many girls whose mothers are career women. Is this something you've noticed too?
I know. I'm not sure we have noticed that. I think, no, I don't think we've noticed that exactly. I think that what we have noticed, and there's lots of research out there that is around the sort of differentiated impacts of social media, particularly on early teen girls versus boys, particularly around body image, self-worth.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And also remember, adolescence is the time where this is what, researchers talk about, standing out to fit in. So you're trying to find your unique contribution to your tribe. Who is my tribe and how can I contribute? And so because young girls tend to go through puberty earlier, that peer stand out to fit in sort of drive is probably, much more present often than in young boys, especially in the early, 12, 13, 14, these early adolescent phase. And so I think we've seen that the messages and the impacts, particularly of peer.
Of social media,
social
body
media.
shaming and the like.
But also any peer. Any peer effects. You could have it in person, kids kids turn against each other in school. What we haven't seen, but maybe it's because we haven't looked in particular, is lack of role models. No girls really talk to us differently than boys about lack of role models. We did find that girls, not in our quantitative research, we partnered with a nonprofit called Transcend, and we looked at over 65,000 students, nationally representative survey in the US, and 2,000 parents looking at their experiences of school and getting parents' view of their kids' experiences of school. And we didn't find many gender differences in terms of what schools are serving up in the survey. But in the qualitative research, we did find that girls seem to be more socialized to be
which is
in achiever mode.
fitting
and boys,
fitting in into the group.
exactly.
Yes.
And boys more socialized to passenger mode. So, boys talked about not gaining status for being
it's a different
smart.
story.
Right. But being cool and not caring too much and, sort of classic passenger mode. We had one boy say, oh, in 8th grade, I pretended I didn't know what was going on in school, to be cool and seem like I didn't care. He's like, but now in 10th grade.
Sure.
And then girls, we found them again, in the qualitative research, much more likely to say things like, I just have to stay up really late to study for this test because I don't want my teacher to think I don't care. I don't want her to be disappointed in me. And I want her to know that I care a lot about doing well in her test because I respect her and I'm a good student. We really never heard a boy say that.
Which is very
Not to say that there aren't some who don't care, but we heard boys saying, I would much rather, this is on the topic of parental involvement, I would much rather, it feels much better for me to study on my own and get a B on my Spanish test. This one boy was talking about Spanish, than have my mom nag me the entire night, every 20 minutes to study for my Spanish test and have her help me and be there hovering over me and to get an A. So that's what we found.
No, I think it's interesting because you think of, and I don't know the statistics, you would know them much better. Women are excelling in college these days, is what I'm understanding. In universities, why boys are not. Because they've all of a sudden been recognized as being bright and take off.
And maybe perfect achievers. That's what the story by Mr. Schulte-Mark was. That's really interesting because clientele was very rich people, right? Hamburg, where he's working, etc. It was kind of a very privileged environment. Let's put it that way. So all these career women, super achievers, so to speak. And these girls had the feeling, okay, this is not the role model for me. He wrote a whole book about it because it was so irritating for him. It's a wonderful environment, like a lot of money, men is working.
And what is the problem?
Yeah, what is the problem? And the problem was there was no hope, no role model, no way, no future. And this future question is really interesting because I saw the attention economy we're living in has shrinking time horizons. Let's put it that way. So when I gave lectures in the 90s, I was talking to my other professors asking them, so what's your vision in 10 years ahead, etc. This question got kind of obscene in 2010 or so. The attention span of these guys really shrinked to next quarter or something. And the kids sense also this loss of future. So I would say that's one of the biggest problems here.
Yeah.
I find that so interesting. And, we didn't really hear it about role models, but now that you're bringing up the class component, there was, I think it might be actually two sides of the same phenomenon, but maybe described differently. One of the things that we did find, particularly for kids in high-income communities and families, is this sense of very narrow pathways to success.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what the no role models is, which was the sense of there's only a couple of things that you can do to be successful in your life, and a huge amount of family pressure. To follow that. Socially prescribed perfectionism. Very large, particularly among girls, but boys too, to follow this narrow path, which is to get super, and this is where kids would get, this is the dark underbelly of achiever mode. They get kind of stuck in achiever mode, where get perfect grades, go to a top notch university, ranked whatever in whatever place you are, and go on and, be a management consultant, work in finance, be an engineer, be a doctor, be a, whatever, like these types of professions. I don't think university professor was on there, sadly. But, and a lot of young people, we heard, especially from high income communities, felt hemmed in. And I think this is your point about no future. They felt like they were on a hamster wheel where the work to get a good grade was a bit meaningless. It's just to get a good grade, to get a good grade, to get a good university, to get a good job. And what's the point of life? How do I be a good citizen? How do I be a good family member? How do I be a good friend? How do I contribute really? So a lot of kids began to question that narrow sort of role model, sort of pathway to success, again, in these high income communities, and did disengage. There are some great researchers out of Stanford who talk about students describing themselves in that experience as robo students, that they're just sleepwalking through. They don't see the point. They don't see the purpose. Then the mental health stuff kicks in. Because they feel they can't get off. They're getting the messages, by the way, from their schools, from their peers, probably either forcefully from parents or maybe subtly from parents who say, I say, do your best. But whatever they pick up is,
I would say, what's missing here, pathway. What is missing here is the art of failure. Samuel Beckett said once wonderfully, like, I tried, I failed, I tried again, I failed.
Yes.
That's art of failure. This achiever mode is really like this perfectionism is just looking for this one role model, etc.
Yes.
And it's just stupid. I mean, if you, in particular in this digital environment we live in, it's absolutely stupid.
So one of the things that we write about, I can't remember the chapter in the book. Is it chapter 8? It might be. Is what can families and teachers do to help kids stuck in achiever mode get out of it? And one of the pieces, exactly like you said, Martin, is to help them
fail
and recover. And we give this, analogy of riding a bike. Like if you're teaching your son, 6, 7, whatever, or daughter to ride a bike, the minute they wobble, you wouldn't go grab the handlebars. They would never learn to ride a bike. But we do that with school, especially in the communities that you're talking about, these highly competitive environments where kids perceive a narrow pathway to success. And parents are probably doing it out of love and care and concern and worry that they want their kids to be successful and they're helping them set themselves up. But it comes out as, I have no confidence in you. You are not capable. You are not able. And we know from self-determination theory, if you don't feel competency and have some autonomy, your reaction is to withdraw and sort of wither within. And one of the great things teachers can do is something called is fostering productive struggle. There's an exercise called the learning pit out of the UK, which is literally like a physical pit where it's a metaphor. You're learning something. Oh my gosh, it gets hard. You fall into the pit. But there's people here to help you climb up. It's going to be painful. And then you're going to come up at a higher level. And there's schools who use that. And so, for example, giving kids math problem sets that are 1 year advanced from what they're doing, and saying, hey, it's going to be hard. You're not going to know how to do this.
Make it.
Nobody can help you. You can ask questions. We're here to help. But the point is for you to feel out of your depth and figure out, how do I get out? And that feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. It's incredibly important. I agree.
This is a curious topic, and just kind of morphing along into this next question shifts a bit, but it's related, and it's a fascinating one that Martin and I talk about a lot. When we look at today's job market, it appears that Gen Z, that is the smartphone generation, is extremely insecure, which manifests as a somewhat distorted view of reality. 30% of this generation aspires to become influencers, yet faced with a real-life work situation, they excel at task masking or exhibiting unrealistic job expectations. Of course, it's too simplistic just to bash generations here. I think of my young nephew who's very ambitious and he's studying economics. And he tells me he's never been confronted with the question of the attention economy in his studies, which makes me believe that our education system has become increasingly hollowed out over recent decades about the digital age, meaning that we've become complacent with a kind of sham production. And because of this complacency, this business model tends to produce degrees not worth the paper they're printed on. Everyone just carries on. And you get this kind of Potemkin village, and we have all of these people with these degrees that can't get jobs anymore. What do we do to fix this?
This is a very big and difficult question, but I do think this question of credential inflation, grade inflation, mirrored with the impacts of technology on kids' ability to attend is real. So you talk to teachers and a number of them and professors, and I'd ask you both, who say, I used to assign 12 books a year, and now I'm just assigning chapters because kids can't seem to get through it.
Yeah.
So there has been a reaction that is about a lowering of expectations and and sort of what kids should be able to do, which is not helpful. Like, that is actually not helpful. It won't help. So one of the reasons that we ended up focusing on student motivation and engagement is because we went out really asking a question: why don't kids love school? And we found in third grade, 75% of kids say they love school, and by 10th grade, 25% of kids say they love school, and which is, to me, the saddest statistic in the entire study, because kids are hardwired to learn, especially adolescents. They are hardwired to go explore and create, and they care, and so we're sort of bashing out the love of learning. And so I do think that actually this idea of building explore muscles, sort of the muscles that explore mode builds, which is really preparing kids not just for an age of achievement, where you can get achievement through cheating. The other part of the Potemkin village is that many kids are cheating, and we're cheating before ChatGPT arrived, right? Because especially the kids in achiever mode who care, they're constantly they don't want to not fall down below, because somehow their identity and self-worth is tied up to getting a perfect grade, so they'll do any means necessary, and so that certainly hollows out your skills. So I think if we take explore mode seriously and say that kids, we need teaching and learning experiences, be they outside of school in extracurriculars, or in school, or at home, even with family members, that build kids' explore muscles, that will mean a whole bunch of different things will change. It will mean, like Kia, she will have to demonstrate verbally and get up in front of people and present. Kia's the one with the escape room around President Abraham Lincoln. Demonstrate her knowledge. She won't be able to fake that. She's gonna. There's a lot. You're gonna have to sit there, and the professors will grill her and walk through the escape room and ask her questions. There's no hiding. There's no copying someone else's escape room presentation and
no
coming
copy
in.
paste.
Right. So I actually do think it's probably not the only thing, but it's a big piece of the puzzle, is if we center student motivation, engagement, and explore muscles, giving kids agency, opportunity, and having to really demonstrate what they know, truly them, not being able to hack a test or something, that will go a long way in raising the bar and getting kids excited so that they do develop these skills.
Pushing on this a little bit.
Yes.
Pushing on it. There's also this question of academia not being prepared to use the digital tools yet, knowing how to use them. And especially Martin and I spend a lot of time talking about the attention economy. And we talk to a lot of people, and people will say, oh, yeah. Nobody can tell us about it. So it's really telling to talk to my nephew about it. And he's like, well, but nobody's even teaching me about it in university. And knowing how to, because you talk about ChatGPT, all of this technology is moving very fast. Yeah. And we talk about apocalypses, which is not really the point. It's the point that we need to learn how to use this, and teachers need to learn how to use this. I mean, that seems to be a
And the
real
appearance of a
issue.
new specimen, which is interesting. I saw my son, and he was telling me, like, I was asking for the psychology of a comrade, a class comrade, and he was saying, that's just another copy paster. And so that was the first time I thought, interesting. There's a new specimen arising, which is the copy paster, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are looking, I think you're spot on in terms of we have made a big mistake collectively, we, people who work in education and with young people with social media and cell phones in particular, of basically not having an opinion on them, letting them sort of flood into the young people's lives. Again, with a narrative being told to us, these are great, kids will be creative. It's a new tool. They're, and not sort of having an intentional rollout and engagement with this new technology that is beneficial, because there's some great upsides to it, but a lot of downsides. And I think we need to not make the same mistake with generative AI, which is again why I'm chairing and started the Brookings Global Task Force on AI in Education. And one thing, so we're in the midst of doing the research, but one thing is clear: it is not like anything that has come before. We have been using predictive AI, which knows the right and wrong answer to great effect in education, with sort of supplemental adaptive learning games or apps or whatnot. This is a whole different scale. And what does it mean when a technology is so good at pattern recognition, which it is, given that the act of learning, and now I'm really thinking of young people, kids, is pattern recognition. That's what literacy is. That's what math sense is. That's what history is. It's almost everything is pattern recognition. And so how do we do two things at once? Hold space so that young people can develop the faculties they need to survive in this world and thrive. And even figuring out what exactly those are, we need to figure that out, because we do not know. I'm not a neuroscientist, but certainly have many who we talk to, and they're like, we don't exactly know. There is no child development answer to what can a kid do. What does a kid have to do on their own versus what they can have generative AI do? So we need to hold that, while at the same time doing what you brought up, which I would call AI literacy, which is, I'm a fan of a new framework out that's being commented on at the moment by the large education community globally. It's an OECD EU framework that has also been supported by this coalition called Teach AI, which we're a part of. And it's 4 things. Kids need to know how to engage with AI. That's the stuff we most often talk about. How do you do a prompt? Is there a hallucination? What is AI? How does it even work? So they understand how to engage. The second thing is how to manage different AIs, because there's going to be lots of different AIs, and how do you, help manage all of them? The third is to create with AI, which is not just let me be a passive consumer. I too have agency. I can use this to do something and have a voice with it. It's a real tool. And the fourth, which I've seen hardly anybody talk about, but I think might get to your nephew's point, is how to design AI. It's, that this is not the law of generative AI is not, like the laws of physics. Like, they can be changed and designed in a different way because we made them, we human beings. So teaching young people not only that that it's possible, but how might you rethink the design of AI for X, Y, and Z purpose? I think those 4 will go a long way. But to your point, we need teachers, we need educators. People need a bunch. This is a heavy lift. It won't just happen automatically, and it's not like we had in computer science. It's not just one teacher who needs to do it. All domains.
It belongs to the humanities.
It belongs to every domain. Art teacher.
Sure.
Because this is a general purpose technology that does everything. Music teachers, art teachers, PE teachers, math teachers.
It's a universal
history.
machine, and it's a universal story.
So that is a big shift and lift in education systems. But I think we need to prioritize it.
I must admit that in the early 90s, I watched my son grow up with absolute fascination. One particular episode touched me deeply. Two 9-year-old boys sitting in front of a computer game, both with bright red cheeks. When the little friend said to my son, look, Philip, productivity is going up 90%. That absolutely fascinated me. Here we have two Waldorf school kids still unfamiliar with reading, since, as you know, at the Waldorf school, you dance your name before you start reading.
Right.
And yet they had this incredibly complex set of parameters under control through a strategy game.
Yeah.
I thought to myself that if you had imagined this in the 1970s, during Dennis Meadows' time, when he just used 7 parameters for his limits to growth, it would have been unthinkable. Or you would have considered them whiz kids and hired them on the spot. You could say a whole new educational story began here, because my son, who is now a very successful data scientist, wanted to understand the technology trees in the Age of Empires. He quickly learned to read and then on his own switched to a high school with an emphasis of Latin and Greek. But here he found himself surrounded by teachers who were essentially digitally illiterate. How do you see that? Isn't that this real problem, like a literacy problem of our educated class, of our elites?
Yeah, I do. I do think back to the beginning when we talked about relevance. One of the things that young people pick up is, and I don't think it's just technology. It can be relevant social issues. It can be current events. It can be all sorts of things. How is what I'm being asked to do connected, useful, contributing in any way, shape, or form to what life is like today? That relevance gap. So, I'm actually a fan. I mean, Waldorf. You sent your kids to Waldorf, so you are too.
He loved it.
So you are too. Making sure that there are technology-free spaces for young people to grow and develop, because we've evolved over millennia to connect with other people in person and develop our faculties that way. So I'm a fan of that, but one of the things that is interesting is, because I've had that same experience, Martin. I have 2 boys, and I've played video games with my kids. Minecraft.
You too. You are wonderful.
Minecraft is one which I love, because it's all open-ended and creative. Yeah. You are you're the author of you're the hero of your own journey in that.
Yeah, wonderful.
But also Zelda. I'm very bad, but but they are doing all sorts of mental strategy. Should I power up? That's going to get me 4 times this, but this I have to go fight this boss, and he needs 7 times that. So maybe I should take this. What do you think I should do, Mom? And I'm like, I can't do this. I have no idea. It's too complicated for me. And they're making these they're voicing over and making these decisions.
And super fast.
So I think there's a huge amount that we can do in out of school learning time. And I'm a fan of sort of harnessing all the learning environments where that can be done, whether it's on the sports field or in a community project or online with others. And I think there's been great success actually of gaming learning. So the thing that you worry about is when the opportunity costs outweigh the benefits. So if you're gaming for 12 hours a day and you don't have physical activity, social interaction, you don't see your family, you're not having dinner, you can't communicate eye to eye. That's a recipe that needs adjustment. But I think particularly games that are interpersonal, where kids are playing together.
Sure. Yeah.
Moving along, examining our educational landscape in the U.S., we encounter a paradoxical trend. Education, particularly at Ivy League universities, is becoming increasingly expensive while academic performance is steadily declining, progressing to the point where the concept of meritocracy, as described by Michael Sandel, has fallen out of favor, which is really weird to me.
Especially in the U.S.
Especially in the U.S.
In Harvard.
It's sort of in our
yeah, exactly. And so when we get to this point, when we have an esteemed professor like Sandel speaking of a tyranny of meritocracy, it's hardly surprising that the less gifted are reluctant to make an effort. How do we turn this around?
Yes. Well, I think part of I think part of the social commentary on meritocracy and the backlash stems from this idea we talked about earlier. And it is basically thinking that achiever
Perfectionism.
mode is the top mode. And in fact, our whole education system is set up to reward achiever mode. That is why you get class rankings. That is why someone is first, someone is second, someone is third. It's why you don't get credit for, getting an aha moment and mastering a concept 2 weeks after the test is done or, class is out, even though you still have mastered it as a young person. So
yes,
I think that there is something more fundamental about turning education not into the root of education, right, is development. To develop, to draw out, to the word even, right, to draw out, to guide. And it's become more of a shove in a certain amount of facts and figures that you can repeat on certain measures that will therefore make you top. And I think people feel it, and we see it in the news. People are hacking the system to try to get on the top, whether it's cheating, whether it's, we had this big scandal here, Martin, in the US a while ago around Varsity Blues, which is wealthy parents paying for other people to take their kids' high stakes tests to get into college. Wacko. So I think the pushback on meritocracy stems from this sort of sense that there's a narrow pathway. The point of education is achievement only and being on top. And that's the only way to be successful, and all the pressure that comes from it, because it does, as we talked about earlier, hollow out learning.
Sure,
and in fact, learning is an end goal. It's what you get on the test, not the insights you have or the process along the way. And that, again, that's why to me, this explorer mode is a real antidote. And if we could, and I think AI will force us in this direction.
Absolutely.
I think if we can shift from sort of an age of achievement, a system that rewards achievement, to an age of exploration, like a system that rewards explorer mode. What are the good questions you ask? What are the new insights you've had? Show us your iterative learning journey, not just what you get on the end goal. The process of learning. That will really shift what we mean even by meritocracy, right? Because it's almost the criteria for meritocracy has been hollowed out and hacked and less meaningful, less relevant, like all of the above. And people get disillusioned with the idea. And so I think it's more what we mean by excellence.
What I really appreciated was how you included the media transformation that has occurred in our lifetime in the equation. With this in view, couldn't you argue that the disengaged teen is simply an expression of a changing world? A few years ago, I did some educational consulting for German state government, and I made it clear to those responsible how hopelessly outdated our school system is. So outdated that no one saw anything wrong with making students take multiple choice tests on paper. Even though Skinner's teaching machine in the 54 was designed to provide immediate feedback from the start, and thus has more in common with the computer game than writing with the text. To illustrate the absurdity of this process, I often tell a story from the early days of the printing press. In the monastic world, there was a sophisticated copying system, Pichia, where each monk specialized in copying specific sections of the Bible, such as the Book of Kings, the Psalms, the Apocalypse, and the like. And what do you think? What did these monks do when the first Gutenberg Bibles arrived? Naturally, they examined their area of expertise in each and every Bible, every single book. This raises the suspicion, couldn't it be that the problem are not the children, but their educators?
Yes, I'm not sure if it's the educators, because the educators are stuck in the same system, but I fully agree that it's not that we have less smart kids today, kids who don't care, who care less. It's really, I think actually kids are responding rationally to an irrational context.
Absolutely.
And I think educators are too, right? Yeah. So I do think it is a question of shifting systems, and that we are at the end of one era and the beginning of another. If we look back on it many years ago, I do think generative AI is actually, I think it's the printing press, the printing press, the internet, and generative AI. When it comes to massive shifts on the education landscape, I think it is of that big and momentous a moment. And so we do absolutely need to radically shift our teaching and learning pedagogy. And again,
Absolutely.
I do think generative AI will push us in that direction, hopefully. And I think you could do many different things. You could do the sort of autonomy supported teaching methodology that John Marshall Reeves talks about, which is these sets of small tweaks in any classroom. You could do all the way to full scale curriculum and school redesign, like the studios that Kia did, and anywhere in between. And I've studied education innovation over my career. One of the books I'd done earlier was a technical policy book. It was called Leapfrogging Inequality. And we looked at 3,000 education innovations around 160 countries. And one of the things that I hope this AI moment will do in education is help educators find new ways to bring knowledge acquisition together with knowledge application. So, for example, at the moment, we're very indexed on knowledge acquisition. To what end? What do I do with this know-how? Now, at the moment, generative AI, with all its flaws, and it's getting better by the millisecond, can do a lot, has the knowledge, like it can synthesize 3 texts and create an argument, right? Yes. I still think kids will need to develop those skills, but they're going to need to take information and knowledge and know-how, and they're going to need to have some of it. They can't just rely on the internet with all its problems and Gen AI that makes the internet go on steroids, but they're really going to have to figure out what do I do with this information? How, if I'm studying, biology, how could I use that information to help my local park replant trees because a bunch of them died, or whatever it is? So I think that's what is going to have to happen. And educators need help to be able to make that transition, because that is not how they're trained. Teacher training colleges most of the time. And moreover, it's not the incentives that they're given when they're in the system, both from parents and from their leaders. Their incentives are that achiever mode, make sure everybody gets on grade level.
Good quality.
So
we had a wonderful talk with Dixon Depommier, who was one of the fathers of like, vertical farming, etc. And just like he told how it changed schools when all of a sudden they saw plants growing, really getting productive, and that's the application stuff you're talking about. Is it so getting the feeling I'm productive, I'm changing the world. I'm not just conforming to some achievements that somebody writes down on paper.
Yeah. Because one of our great first of all, this knowledge acquisition with knowledge application is not a new concept. It's been around for a very long time, John Dewey and many others, but we haven't executed it at scale. And, kids just start seeing the irrelevance of writing, figuring out, a rectangle, height times length equals area. And we have a very big problem where it's called a problem of transfer, where many young people cannot take that book knowledge in this one context, a worksheet, a multiple choice test, whatever, and use it somewhere else. There's a great example from our research of a kid getting straight A's in math and couldn't figure out how much paint he needed to paint a rectangular fence in his backyard, because he couldn't take the math in the worksheet and apply it in a real world context. This is a huge problem.
Yeah. So, if you look back at history, it's clear that our idea of childhood isn't something natural, but is closely tied to our cultural practices. Yes. You take Philip Arias's History of Childhood, or examine how our educational institutions have changed from their foundations in the Greek gymnasium and medieval university. It's always interesting to us in our conversations with many people about institutions, how they seem to lack a historical awareness of their beginnings. As in this case, where people tend to assume their childhood experiences is a natural thing. And as you know from your experiences in third world countries, our models are nowhere near self-evident. If you were to advise a modern education policymaker on how to approach education in the age of artificial intelligence, where the tire hits the road, what would your recommendations be?
Well, philosophies of childhood are near and dear to my heart, and I always think that they as you say, reflect social structure and moral values, really. I'm not talking about religion necessarily. I'm talking about what we see as good in society.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
it was, long ago, you can look at it historically, you can look at it geographically, but, historically, kids who were probably deemed today extremely aggressive were heroes on the battlefield.
Yes.
They were actually the ones who were lauded. They were physically strong. They were fearless. They were aggressive. They would go around violently hitting. They were our generals and our leaders. Right? Put them right into military training, and that was what was deemed as valuable and good and excellent. And today they would probably be in detention and truancy. So part of it is really to think about what kind of world do we want? And we spend too little time thinking about this in education. We have, and this is where I think there's also a combination of pushback on the meritocracy, that education is really just about putting knowledge in kids' heads, and the more knowledge, the better.
The Nuremberg funnel.
Yes.
Yeah, Paulo Freire, who's a Brazilian progressive educator, talked about banking approach to education. Like children are like bank accounts. You would just deposit every day new sets of information, and that actually doesn't work very well. He came out of Brazil and found that didn't work at all for his rural communities, because it wasn't meaningful, wasn't tied to it didn't make any sense. Actually, it was totally devoid from their real life. And I think that's spread around the world now. And so I think the number one thing we need to do is start thinking about, what is the world we want? How should schools play a role in developing young people to generate that world, and bring young people into that conversation? That would really instill a lot of meaning, a lot of excitement, a lot of sense of importance, and sort of be a counterweight to this, I'm a robo student, I'm on a treadmill, and I just have to be perfect. And this whole sort of artificial ladder is artificial. There's many pathways to success in life. So bringing that in early.
When we consider that a professor who reviews a bachelor's thesis today cannot be certain if ChatGPT is the true author, and if this shock catches universities unprepared and off guard, it seems to me that we're entering the final stage of dismantling our education system. If you were a science fiction writer describing how a futurist, Wilhelm von Humboldt, introduces a new wonderful education system into the world, what would it look like?
Okay, so if I was a science fiction writer, am I the villain? Am I
I know
villainous?
you might be. You might be the science fiction. You might be also the villain.
Oh, no. I was wondering, do you want an example of a bad thing or a good thing? I got confused by the villain. The villain.
No, the Wilhelm from Humboldt.
Wilhelm. Okay.
Wilhelm, like a
Humboldt
the
University. Yes.
Got it.
Wilhelm von Humboldt,
Yes.
like this Prussian guy.
Got you. Yes. Okay. So I would, I think I would make young people have technology-free time, which is a bit countercultural in industrialized societies and communities. Not totally. There's rural communities who are definitely left out, because kids need in-person socialization. So that's one thing I would do. The second thing I would do is make sure that kids do develop an understanding of knowledge. I am actually where I've been for 25 years, been being like, we're too over-indexed on just facts and figures and knowledge. And now I'm worried with generative AI, we're going to lose that, because if you don't have a base of knowledge, you will be so easily manipulated. So make sure you have a base of knowledge, but do not develop that knowledge devoid of what it could be used for. So that would be the third thing. You could, for example, this is one school recently, the kids were learning all about Asian culture and the South Pacific, as well as climate change and whatnot, by designing a floating city. They had picked Kiribati, this little island in the South Pacific. Kiribati was going to be underwater in a couple years. How would you design this city to float? These are middle school kids. And they were learning history. They were learning, social studies about different cultures.
Yeah.
They were learning
The
about
holistic view.
climate change, and they had to write, and they had to demonstrate that they knew what they were talking about. But it was all meaningful because it was towards some end.
Yeah.
And so I think those would be the three big things.
So that would bring back like a utopian spirit into education, is it?
Yeah.
Like a future project.
And also maybe as, I would say like the floating, maybe to call it out, the floating city project was not selected randomly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was because we are citizens of the world.
Yeah.
And we should care. There was a civic orientation
to
it, right? Even though they weren't, it wasn't a lesson in Civics 101 where you learn branches of the government and how a bill becomes a law, which is important knowledge, but it would be better if you applied it to a context. So there, I think that sort of maybe the fourth is imbue it with sort of a sense of moral values and good citizenship.
And if you were the villain, now the real.
Yes, if I was the villain, if I was the villain, I would basically do what we're doing, which is, ChatGPT is in the U.S. is OpenAI's, not long ago report said the number one active weekly users are college age students, 18 to 24. So we don't change what we do. Young people we pretend we're just in this little we pretend schools or universities are little planets not connected to communities in the world, and we keep doing as we have done.
The same thing.
And
Business
kids
as usual.
use AI constantly, all the time, and to basically not to their great detriment. And we just keep passing them along, and they don't have agency, they don't have motivation, they don't have knowledge, they don't have skills. Like they might have really good skills at answering essay questions with ChatGPT, which is not bad, and running it through AI humanizers, so the anti-plagiarism checker doesn't catch it, which is happening all the time. Right? And then just giving kids the sense that education and learning is an input out, it's a race. And it's all about the finish line, which is not the right way to approach life. And certainly not how we're going to prepare kids to thrive in an AI world when they leave school.
Dear Rebecca, that was a pleasure talking to you.
It was lovely to be with you both. Thank you for having me.